So, Eamon, I remember covering this case in around 2017 at a cab hearing. And, sometimes you don't believe what you're hearing. Like, we all know these email scams arrive into your inbox with, hello, my name is John. I have secured an inheritance of $3 million, but I need a bank account to rest it in until I can claim it. Could I use yours, stranger? And can you give me the details of your bank account? So you just put it in, or it goes into spam or whatever. But it still works, and that's why people are still doing it. And this case involved a guy called Noel Patrick Ikponwamba, who was living, I kind of think, in Lucan at the time.
Yeah, he's a house in Leixlip.
Leixlip, yeah. So he was married and had kids and had come to Ireland from Nigeria and based himself here and managed to seemingly pass 1.7 million through his accounts in this very email scam. Now, by the time the Criminal Assets Bureau had kind of caught up with him, there was 40,000 in an account and an insurance policy. They took a proceeds of crime case and sort of froze these. But Ikponwamba was gone to the hills and left behind this story, I suppose, for us to talk about. But he was based here in Ireland, and he was sort of using sometimes in these scams the whole idea that he was here, he was Irish. He posed as a woman, I think, to one of his victims in California, who somehow managed to be scammed out of €400,000 of life savings.
No, it is. It's hard to believe, and I know it's. We don't hear as much about it now. No, it's known as the 419 advanced fee fraud.
Right.
And the 419 comes from, I think, the Nigerian Penal Code, where Section 419 is it's illegal to be involved in fraud.
Right.
Like it covers all that area, so they're just known as the 419ers. And at one point, and they're probably still doing it in some parts of the world, where just millions of emails are sent out. Like, my name is Eamon and I'm due to get 83 million from an inheritance, but I need 500,000 to pay the tax, before it can be cleared. And if you could help me. And sometimes this is kind of tied up, as in the case of the Californian gentleman, it's tied up then with, I suppose, a bit of catfishing and, the romance fraud as well. So
right.
He was going to help her get her, whatever it was, 11.3 million or something from her inheritance. And he sent 338,000 euro, like nearly, I think, $450,000 at the time.
Bit by bit, or in total?
In total, but no, I think in 3 transactions in his case.
And
she was going to come and live with him.
A romance fraud?
Well, it started out as the inheritance fraud, the same thing.
Yeah.
But there was an element of the romance fraud tied into it. So,
right.
So he kind of thought that this woman was going to, as soon as she got her money, was going to come and be able to live with him. And he'd recently kind of, I think, got a payment. This is mentioned in some of the affidavits. And of course, the money went through some accounts based in Ireland, accounts that were connected to Patrick Ikponwamba and his wife, Efe Patrick, as well. She had, I suppose, nothing to do with it, but she was a co-signatory on the account, so she was named as a correspondent.
Mm. Did we get details of, how much effort was put into this sort of romance fraud and how much kind of communication had to be, had to go on before this gentleman parted with this money?
There were dozens of emails and often, and some of these were listed, and some of them then were supposedly from a security expert who's coming on board to advise them on the best way to do this. And then, somebody who's, in customs in a certain country, but it would literally be members of the same gang, if not Noel Patrick, who's Ikponwamba. We might just use the name that he used when he was in Ireland, Noel Patrick. It's a bit easier for us.
It is a bit.
So Noel Patrick was probably behind a lot of these different alter egos.
And
you're really dealing with the one person.
Was there voices? Was there kind of video calls or anything like that?
There was meetings face to face when you look at, because there was another Dutch person who lost a little bit more money, again, in the 400,000 region. And at one point, he got a bit suspicious about sending this money. And they said, no, it's true, you can meet our associates. And he was flown to Dublin and he was taken to a vault and he was shown boxes of cash that was reportedly over $11 million. And this was obviously to saying, look, this is a legitimate operation. This is what we do.
Where are these vaults in Dublin with $11 million?
Well, it was a vault, but I don't know. I mean, like we've seen it before where this, somebody's walked through an office and there's a revenue commissioner's office painted, and it's there for 10 minutes while this person has walked past it, and it's gone before anyone else can see it. So this is how they work.
Elaborate.
And that they will go to these lengths. I mean, the 419 gangs are really sophisticated, really hard working as well. And they get their money back to Nigeria. Now, Noel Patrick didn't get completely away with it. He was arrested in Dublin Airport as part of the fraud squad's investigation into this, and he was actually charged with 12 counts of theft. He was given bail and then disappeared, never to be seen again.
But is it my imagination, or was he at court on the original proceeds of crime? Did he kind of come to sort of fight for it?
No, he didn't.
He didn't?
No, he's never engaged.
Okay.
Like once he left the country in 2012.
And they never found him again.
And so I mean, the money essentially has been frozen that long. I mean, it would have been kind of officially deemed the proceeds of crime around 2017.
Right.
And so we're getting to the 7-year period now where it can be finally seized, because that's the legislation. So that's why it came up again. And so there is actually an order made that as of next October, a date in October, the state will be able to seize it. And then it was mentioned as well in one of the hearings during the summer that there was three victims who were being represented in court. So if you consider that you're talking about 1.7 million went through their accounts, and you're talking about splitting their share of the 40 grand, it's small comfort, but at least it's going back to where it should go.
It's really hard to imagine how you can find yourself in a situation that you believe this, but I suppose people can be vulnerable for many reasons.
Yeah, and people who wouldn't normally be vulnerable could, be vulnerable just for a brief period of time. And I mean, the whole psychology of fraud is about you meet someone who is almost your peer, but you kind of look up to them a little bit. So if you meet someone at that kind of, so, you could say that would never work on me, but a fraudster wouldn't approach you in that sense. I mean, a fraudster in your case would probably come across as a world-class producer of documentaries who would fool you into investing into a non-existent documentary company. You're getting worried now. But that's how it would work. Or at the moment that you're thinking of, buying an apartment somewhere, and somebody stings you because you've met them through some,
So it's bespoke.
Fraudsters will tailor it to whatever you like.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus, I did a book, I think, in 2020, I can't remember now, 2010, called The Fraudsters, and I had a whole chapter on the 419 scammers. And part of it, I did this thing of what was some American journalists were doing was 419 scamming yourself, where you'd bait them, as in B-A-I-T, not bait them as in jam the country with a stick. But so those guys, I went back and forth, and and I was saying, great.
And did they email you kind of like in this sort of carpet bombing way?
I just waited till one of these emails come in, like we need help in getting this 92 million euro or whatever out of Sierra Leone. So I replied, say, God, I'd love to get involved. And I went through the whole thing with them, and I said, well, how do I know it's true? And they were sending me pictures and of the money and all the documents and all the rest. And I said, well, he says, look, it's been really interesting in talking to you, but I don't think I'm going to go through with it. But what I am looking for is a nice young Christian wife. Oh no, actually, I said, first of all, what I'm looking for is a nice wife. Yeah. And he said, we have the perfect person for you. And next minute they sent me this picture of a lady in a bikini.
Right.
And then I said, no, I'm looking for a Christian wife. And they sent me back another more demurely dressed one. So then eventually,
whatever you wanted.
So then eventually it came to sending the money to them, and they were going to transfer. And I got a Western Union transfer form and doctored it and made it look like I'd sent them money.
Yeah.
And they got really angry. And they said, no, that money hasn't arrived. And then to say, we have contacts in Scotland Yard and you've now defrauded, the Western Union form and all the rest. So it was an interesting story to do at the time, messing around with them, I suppose, to some extent. Man bites dog kind of a situation. Well, a little bit, yeah. It wasn't that original at that stage, but I mean, I think people were getting to the point where they were just playing practical jokes, and some of these 419ers saying, well, how do I know it's true? Show me a picture of you holding today's newspaper. Or that could be, any newspaper. Take a picture of you now holding a fish, and they come back holding a fish and stuff like that.
So Noel Patrick was really operating here in those years that you're talking about. So they must have been big then, were they, around the 2010 period?
It was, yeah. Without a doubt. I mean, you used to hear about it a lot. And again, you'd hear about it in terms of it was going on, but nobody ever came forward, because obviously you'd be hugely embarrassed that you've been caught. And that's kind of goes for
And especially with those romance scams, I mean, people would be so embarrassed about being vulnerable and lonely and all those things that they had. And they feel so stupid, people who have been defrauded.
Yeah, and that works at any level. And often, a fraudster will use that because they know that somebody that they've basically fooled, emotionally, it's very painful and leaves people very vulnerable. And even to the point where there's stories of kind of these 419 scammers, even though they're multimillionaires, but they've kind of, like, there's a story about a New York-based very successful Chinese restaurateur who basically kept giving his money to this 419 scammer. And the guy didn't need the money anymore from this restaurateur. But like when he'd still ring him and he'd say, look, I know you're a scam artist. I'm not giving you any money. He'd still persuade him. He says, what have you got in your pocket? $10. Send it to me. And it was a game. And it got to the point where the family wouldn't allow him to carry money anymore. So, I mean, a lot of it is a psychological game for these guys. And again, it's all invested in probably back into actual companies and real estate.
And going back into that psychological game, do they get training in it? Like,
I'd say it's a matter of more than ourselves as journalists. Like, a lot of it is on the job.
You learn on the way, yeah.
Yeah, but you would. I mean, look, I mean, if your organization is sending out millions of emails saying I'm a lost princess, or previously I was the Tsar of Russia's great grandniece, and my money is stuck in Azerbaijan, and I need help to get it out. And you're sending out millions of these, so it's somebody's job to send out all these emails, and then it's someone else's job to go through the replies, and then it's someone else's job to start testing the replies, and then somebody is going to take over, and presumably every part of that there's a fee. So if I get a potential mark for you, and you're the true 419er, I might get $500 or $50, whatever it is, for putting the mark onto you, and then you start working on it.
And do they profile the person, the would-be victim? Then, I mean, obviously you have to engage a good bit for them to put the real work into you, to think that you're really going to be. Well,
they have to, and I mean, and to be. If you might have, an operator working from Nigeria, but they will have people in Europe, they'll have people in America, they'll have people all around the world. They can go around and have a look at the address where they say you live and say, this person looks like they have money. And I'm sure they could go further. It depends on their skill set and their connections in any particular country, whether it's Ireland or anywhere else, to even maybe look at your finances and just rob you.
And I mean, what was uncovered in Belgium, in Antwerp, in the aftermath of the EncroChat hack was that there were actual criminal gangs who existed solely to sell information on people, to gather and sell information on people from all walks of society. Yeah. It was very interesting for criminal gangs wanting access to the ports like Rotterdam or, Antwerp, to know if an individual working in those ports probably had debt problems, could have had a bit of a problem with the coke or whatever else. And they had actual files on people, and they would sell those files then to organizations. So presumably the likes of this giant scam coming out largely out of Nigeria has the money to be able to afford to buy profiles on people.
Yeah. Or in some cases they didn't even need to. Like, I mean, they were kind of, they were, I suppose,
I'm sure some of the victims were giving it up themselves as well.
Yeah,
if it was
and there is that, yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea of black market intelligence is, I mean, it has to be a hugely valuable area. Like, and the people involved in that are probably very similar to us. People who know the way around getting information. I mean, some of them could be, corrupt officials. Some of them could be corrupt journalists, people in the media who, see a potential earner when they can. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of legitimate businesses are using private investigators to, I suppose, to harvest information from open source, which is not illegal. And I mean, and we do that all the time. We find information. You can get a huge amount of information, from, especially if you know your way around the court system, if you know your way around kind of some of the legal areas where, there's going to be filings left, whether it's in the States, or, and it could relate to somebody in Ireland, but you may know something about something that happened to them in the States, and you can get information there and vice versa. And I mean, it's a kind of well, I won't say it's a grey area, but it's pretty black and white. I mean, you're either using the information for legal reasons or you're using it for illegal reasons, and I mean.
And then if a criminal operation has somebody, on the payroll who's in the likes of, say, I'm just from the top of my head, revenue, I mean, the amount of information in revenue held by revenue is like enormous.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're getting a complete picture of them, really, aren't you?
Yeah.
With their finances, their earnings, their address, their everything.
Yeah. And it's like, I suppose it's social engineering as well, that I suppose at one point in the old days, you might have said, well, I want to get I need an insider in Google in their headquarters. There's a pub across the road in their headquarters in Dublin. So you could maybe get a job there, or you could just drink there every night and get to know everyone who comes in. And then, after a year or two, you're friendly with a few people, it might be worth as a kind of a little part-time if you're doing this anyway. Mm-hmm. So it depends, like, how much effort and time you're willing to spend on something. You probably will find a connection somewhere. I mean, like we've done it ourselves, and we've gone to places where we don't know anyone in Ireland or Spain or whatever, and you ask around till you find someone and they'll talk to you. And, and sometimes that can happen quite quickly. If you're upfront, it can possibly happen quicker. I mean, it can also end it very quickly as well.
Exactly.
So
it's a risk,
it's something you always have to judge as a journalist. But I mean, if you're doing it for legal reasons, it's fair enough.
So what about the 419 groupings now? Are they still operating? They've changed it up, I imagine.
I think some of the emails are still going.
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget there's people who are, connecting to the internet for the first time, like every day. Like, whether they're young people or people who have just never bothered, or in other countries where there's, the internet is expanding all the time. And it takes a tiny percentage of the millions and millions of emails that go out. I mean, some of them would have converted to, I say, more kind of, and there's kind of an old thing now about, the phishing with a PH, where you're trying to get people to send you your bank, you're posing as your bank, and people are still getting caught with that,
Well, you're getting
thinking that you're dealing with Revolut and you're...
Yeah, but you're getting texts constantly, from...
Customs saying
your tag on your car for the, I don't know how many of them actually I've just ignored. But then I have nearly kind of, sometimes if you're slightly distracted, I wouldn't give my bank details, but I sometimes might kind of go, oh. Or there's the ones about, they're looking for your address. There's a parcel delivery which can't be cleared through customs and all this. So they're constantly evolving, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's people who will say, in our game, who are, know about fraud, and they say they've been caught because they're in the middle of moving house and they had a bunch of Amazon parcels going to the new address, and then they get this thing to say there's a problem with your Amazon delivery, and you just immediately click on it because you're up to your eyes in other tasks. And you get caught. And it's as simple as that. And it's just the sheer number of these texts go out. That's how it works.
And funny, if you wanted to operate it in a more focused way, there are certain properties where the Amazon van is there day in, day out.
Seems to be, isn't there?
Yeah. So you could actually kind of keep an eye on that, or you could watch the Amazon vans where they're particularly going and target those. It's fascinating. I mean, I suppose in a way, these fraudsters that are doing it for money, it's sort of black and white, isn't it? I think the fraudsters, the weird ones, are the ones who are doing it for a kick. They might put a huge amount of effort into working some fraud, but for a minimal amount of money out of it. So the kind of the addiction, there's an addiction there nearly.
Yeah. I mean, I remember speaking to an FBI person involved in fraud a couple of years back, and he referred to those kind of people as lifestyle fraudsters. So these people who go from trick to trick, and they just leave a trail of destruction behind them. Like you would have had, like there was one guy in my book, The Fraudsters, which I'd probably find somewhere online.
I'm sure it's available on Amazon.
But there's one guy, he was very affable, would chat up people in pubs, get to the point where he'd be totally trusted. He's good tips on the racing, and he'd be very popular with everyone. And then 2 months later, the takings would be gone, and somebody's car would be gone with him. The girl, an American tourist who met him at a party, ended up having to pay for the car that she had rented because he took it and was never recovered. So, but he was always going to get caught and just keeps doing it, and has done over the years, and spent a lot of time in jail.
So it's almost a personality disorder.
And and there's some people who are kind of what's the word? They're compelled to do it. Yeah, there is that. And even if you look at, say, for instance, at a higher level, someone like Simon Gold that we've done stories about, the psychic, guy, and he had an estate agents in the UK, and he was leaving a trail of debts and destruction behind him, and but you were talking about millions, but he was never ever going to get away with it. Like, you know, I mean, it was kind of an obvious fraud. Like, I mean, he might have at one point, but he became so notorious that he was never going to get away with it. So you get some level of fraud where, they're it's almost like they want to be caught, or they're playing a game, and getting caught is the jeopardy. Because, a game is more fun if there's jeopardy as well as reward. And again, which feeds into the whole idea. It's like an addiction to gambling, or, it's setting off the dopamine in some part of the brain. But then the really callous fraudsters are the likes of the 419ers and or the company people who used to do the carousel VAT fraud. Remember me trying to explain that to you before?
I do, yeah. No, don't try that again.
It is hard to understand. And there's been some Irish people involved in that, multi-million euro level. And it's a really clever fraud if you're in business, and if you have your whatever company, preferably a haulage company, or you're moving across borders or something like that. You could do it once every 5 years and pocket 5 million, and no one's really going to come after you if you don't keep at it.
The romance frauds, I think, are fascinating. I mean, sure, you can see that on Netflix, the Tinder Swindler, all these stories that.
Now, you had Professor Fox, was it?
Yes,
she was on speaking about it. Yes,
speaking about it.
Yeah.
And I think as people become more and more used to communicating just over text and not face to face, it's growing. There's a lot of people out there who are lonely and who will never complain if they realise they've been defrauded out of something, be it money or their pride, because they're embarrassed.
Yeah, and I actually... I
had protection nearly for the fraudsters.
I had a story recently enough, and it came through an unusual contact of mine who would have been, I suppose, a retired country school teacher who loves going to the likes of Daniel O'Donnell and the old country and Western or the country shows, the likes of Mike Denver and stuff like this. And he called me and he said, look, will you speak to a friend of mine? And it was this lady in Northern Ireland, again, of that age group. And she'd been defrauded by this guy in this kind of circuit, and he had kind of, mentioned he was a financial advisor. And now she actually got her money back, partly because I think the publicity that the Sunday World gave him. And he was since been arrested and jailed over some of this stuff.
But so he's somebody who's placing himself within a certain sort of demographic of people who probably do have money.
Yeah. There's a phrase for that as well. The type of fraud it is, like people say, who pose as a pastor or a preacher and rip off their flock, and they go on to another town or another county in the States and do it all over again, and nobody is kind of willing to say, well, why did Preacher Dillon leave so suddenly and move to Canada? And then you find out, well, 2 million for the new church hall went with him, and it's kind of it's building up a familiarity. You could possibly get it with sports clubs or sports clubs, or with any kind of organization where people are voluntary working together. It could be your line dancing club, Nicola, or something like that. Where somebody comes in and takes a load of money. You're all going to go off to Spain for a line dancing tournament, and next minute that person is gone.
So don't trust anyone, people. It's kind of hard out there, isn't it, nowadays, to work out who are honest brokers and who are not. It's fascinating stuff, and I'd love to come back to a few stories around that.
And we will, definitely, yeah.
Let's do that. Thanks, Eamon.
Always a pleasure.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.